The end of America's longest war is apparently ahead of schedule. President Biden announcing today the U.S. military will complete its withdrawal from Afghanistan by August 31st. That's nearly 2 weeks earlier than his initial deadline of September the 11th. But as American troops pull out, Taliban fighters have been making huge gains, capturing territory and weapons from retreating Afghan soldiers and moving closer to the capital city of Kabul. Today, President Biden defended the U.S. military's rapid withdrawal.
How many thousands more Americans' daughters and sons were you willing to risk? How long would you have them stay?
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well-equipped as any army in the world, and an Air Force.
President Biden says the Taliban has only about 75,000 fighters, and he trusts the Afghan military's capacity to stand their ground. Here they are recapturing a checkpoint from the Taliban militants earlier today. After 20 years of war in Afghanistan, nearly 2,500 Americans are dead, more than 20,000 others wounded. And the United States has spent $825 billion on combat operations. NBC's Courtney Kube has been covering the buildup of the Afghan military for decades now, 2 of them. Courtney, how do they stack up right now against the Taliban?
So it really depends on what part of the Afghan security forces you're talking about. The Afghan commandos are actually pretty good. They've been conducting missions on their own, some counter-terror missions, and they've been operating pretty proficiently for a while now. The Afghan Air Force, they started from nothing. They've actually started to conduct their own missions. They're doing some airstrikes. They struggle with logistics. They struggle with their ability to maintain their aircraft, but they've actually come a long way. Where they find the vulnerabilities, though, are with the local police and the local military who are in the more rural areas. And that's because they just don't get a lot of support from the central government, especially the further you get away from Kabul. And that is one of the underlying issues in Afghanistan is there's a lack of infrastructure, and the further you get away from the central government, the more lawless it potentially becomes. When you're talking about the entire Afghan military and police, they still struggle with intelligence collection. They do pretty well with human intelligence, but they don't do well with signals intelligence, so intercepts and things. That's something that they are going to have a hard time with if they don't get any support from allies. But, you know, another big question here is, what happens if the Taliban does take over, like we heard in that question to President Biden today? If they do, it's very possible that any kind of military and police force will just dissolve. If they don't, will the U.S. and allies continue to provide money to a Taliban-backed military and police force? Most likely not. That is something that the Afghan security forces really rely on here. But we did hear from President Biden. He seems very confident that, in fact, there's not going to be some sort of takeover of the embassy and that the U.S. military, who's going to stay behind for that security, will be able to maintain their security, the security of the perimeter of the embassy.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.